In this video, I'm going to go over preferences in Cyclone, the way that I set them up, and actually the way that I was taught to set them up. So if you'll first go to Edit Preferences, you're going to want to first change this level session to default. Otherwise, when you close the program, all your changes will not be saved, and you'll have to do this again. So let's make sure when we apply that we are setting the level to default. All right, that's very important. Okay, so I'm just going to pull this out a little bit. You'll see we've got about, 10 different options here. So starting out with linear units, I'm going to be working in feet. If you need to change it to meters, maybe you need to change it to inches, this is where you would do that. Imperial types, US survey. Station notation, I'm going to change this to yes. This is important for me for doing roadway alignments. Let's see, coordinate labels for surveyors. Typical is the northern easting elevation coordinate order. So I'll make that change. These will stay. So linear units for PTS LAS exchange. This is going to depend on what file type or what the units are set to in that file type for the PTS or LAS you may be using. This is usually drone data, so it's typically set to meters. I'll leave that the same, but this means that you're going to have the file in this unit. It doesn't mean what it's going to create the file in. So as long as you have linear units in feet, you import a file in meters, it's going to convert it to feet. So when we hit apply, those changes are made, and when we hit OK, it will actually close the window. So let's go back into preferences, and again, just let me remind you, you need to change the level back to default, otherwise the changes we made will not stick. So let's move to the next tab, resolution. So decimal digits for distance, these are simply display increments. So, how many decimal places do I want? 3 is good. That's going to give me, feet to the thousandth of a foot. That's as accurate as I want to be. Architectural, let's change that to a 1/16 of an inch. I don't know why anybody would want 128. Let's see, decimal digits for volume, I think I'll change to 2. Because usually for piles of dirt or rocks, maybe you're measuring, trash for volumes. You don't really care about 4/100ths of a cubic yard. We'll change that to 2. And pretty much everything else is good. So I'll hit apply there. And then we'll move on to measurements. In Cyclone, the measurements come in as like tiny green letters on the default. I think they're hard to read. So we go to body color. You can turn it different colors by just clicking around, but I think yellow shows up the best for the body color, and then you'd also want to make that change for the label color. So let's have those both show up in yellow. Font size, let's change that to 30, and also call out line length, let's just make that a little thicker at 35. And this will give you clear, nice, legible text that you'll read on your reports. These other settings I will leave the same. In the registration tab, there are a couple settings I'm going to change. The first one's going to be the default subsampling percentage. I'm going to change that to 30%, and then also the default max alliteration. Change that to 250. So what does this have to do with? Well, Cyclone is sort of a statistical machine, so it just crunches a bunch of numbers. It's basically, a least squares adjuster. So this is basically capping the number to calculate at 250 in order to give you a solution. So this is basically going to speed the process up, and 250 is plenty of calculations to make for each solution that it gives you. Another one you're going to want to check is make sure that it's set to yes, merge targets when freezing. I think that is now set to default out of the box with Cyclone. So I'm going to hit apply. So these next 3 tabs, we've got fitting, modeling, and model space. All of these settings I'm not going to make any changes to. So let's go ahead and move to scan. So a lot of these settings I don't change here at the top. The ones that I do or would have to change would be sphere target diameter. It's set to 6 inch. If you needed to change that to, like 100 millimeter, that's where you would do that. Also, black and white target size, default is 6 inch. I happen to have the 4.5, so that's where I would change that setting and apply. There's more options down here at the bottom. So survey mode, I've seen that default set to yes before, seen it at no. And now that I understand what it does, I prefer to have it at no. So when you have it set to no, it basically just shows the scan worlds under the project folder. If it's set to yes, the scan worlds are inside a station folder, which for me is just an extra click to get into the scan world. So that's why I prefer to have it set at no. Down here, add vertex to scanner location. So this has been set on no before, or yes without target ID. This is important if you have a P-series scanner and you're doing a traverse or backside or even a resection. You should change to yes with target ID if it's set differently. You need this basically to complete a registration if you are going to do a traverse, backside, or resection. This will put point labels on your different stations, and you can also mark that setup as a station. So make sure that is set to yes with target ID if you do have the P series. And everything else looks good. So moving on to point cloud. So in point cloud, this is where you can change where all your files are going to be stored. So you can see where your work directory is here. The way that I usually like to do it though is I will search Cyclone and then Cyclone user configuration manager, hit next, and I like to look at it this way so I can see my user configuration folder, my library folder, my default data folder, report folder, my temp, where my temp files go, and my model library folder, so I can have control of where each of these files for these folders are stored. So, if my C drive fills up and I need to get an external drive, this is where I would go to change the path to where these files are stored. Up at initialization, I keep all these settings the same, and that pretty much covers it. Those are all the settings that I change in user preferences.